Hello and welcome to Culture Mocktail,
where we unfold and embrace what it means to be a cultural misfit.
And we unpack cultural identity in multiple facets of life.
I'm Noor.
And I'm Aisha.
And we have a very special episode in store for you today. I'm so excited.
We are so excited for this one. We are joined by no other than the founder of Niswa, which is a bilingual platform made for women by women, and it creates a safe space for us as women to talk about our bodies, ovulation cycles, fertility, body literacy, and sex lives.
Please welcome Zainab Alradhi. Hi, Zainab.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Super excited.
Oh, so are we. We can't wait for this.
It's our pleasure, honestly.
So we're going to go straight into this one with you. So what is your culture mocktail?
I was born and raised in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia until I was 18 years old. And that's when I moved to the US. I lived for a bit in Boston, and then I moved to Michigan. And that's where I'm at right now, in Michigan, United States.
It's a good little mix of like the West and the East.
Yes, it's such a beautiful mix.
And that's really what like your work, the big part of your work is that it's bilingual.
We were the first in this arena.
And I love that, honestly. Yeah.
It really is something to be proud of, and something that as we get into this episode, listeners will see is so important for the Arab region.
Yes.
Yeah. But since we're talking about identity and all of that, something that you identify yourself as, like, as we were doing our research, is that, quote unquote, you're a proud user of a menstrual cup.
Yes.
So I'm just curious, why is this very important to you to identify yourself in that way before anything else?
I love my experience with the menstrual cup. Usually people will have, like a surprise look whenever they read that or they hear me identify myself as, a proud user of a menstrual cup. My experience with using the menstrual cup was not just a physical one. It was an emotional and a spiritual one. It was connecting me back into my body, getting me comfortable with a part of myself that wasn't accessible before. It wasn't something that was in my radar. It was kind of disassociated. It was disconnected. And all of a sudden, I give myself that permission to be okay, to care for the environment and care for my body, to connect with my bleed, to see the blood, to measure the blood. It's like, okay, this is me, and this is what my body is letting go of, and this is my life force. And it was like, okay, it opened me into a world of wonders in understanding my body and how it works and how it functions, and into so many doors that opened afterwards. It basically told me that there is other options, and there is so many beautiful ways of looking and understanding my body.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that culture was the main barrier in allowing you to do that before you had reached that phase of where you're like, you know what, this is me and I want to explore and get to know myself and what my body is capable of?
Yes. I would say I, like most of the girls in my generation, I was raised lacking body literacy. So my first period was a surprise, a total surprise. I did not expect it. It wasn't something I knew what it was, that I didn't have any references. I was an 11-year-old girl, and so I was an early bloomer, the first among my friends group. The thing was, the signs were there. Like, I was growing taller, my boobs were growing, my hair was growing. Like, the signs were there, but I didn't have the talk, like there was none of that.
So you didn't know about periods?
No, I didn't.
Before you had your period?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a total shock. I didn't know what it was, and I thought, I felt guilty actually for having it. I thought that I've made a mistake, and that was my punishment. And so I didn't tell anyone. I kept it as a secret, and didn't even tell my mom about it. So she discovered it a few days later. But that was like my first introduction of what it means to be disconnected from my body and not understanding why is it doing what it's doing.
And that's a bit traumatic, to be honest. Like, you're just bleeding and
Yes.
you don't know that you're meant to be bleeding.
Yes.
Because blood is a scary thing as a kid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it didn't stop there, because, you move forward, and I'm sure lots of your listeners maybe, but I met a lot of people who went through this experience. We go through the biology classes, and the reproductive system class is usually canceled in any of the years that I have studied in my school. It will be either canceled or will be jammed into a small portion of the class and added into the next lesson. So we don't go into much detail. The teacher will avoid eye contact. She will be not as loud as we're used to her talking, and
Yeah.
that gets translated into us as students, and we feel it. And now we're feeling even a deeper disconnection to our bodies, because if our teacher, who we trust so much, can't speak about this comfortably, how can we?
You know that it's aib at this point. It's a shame then.
Yeah.
It is.
Right?
And do you know, this actually reminds me that one time, so I had a year in year 6 where I lived in Syria, right? And when I came back to the UK, I went to Arabic schools on weekends, and we would do like every subject, so biology, chemistry, all of that stuff. And in the biology class, we had this these talks about, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like the reproductive cycle, and I didn't understand anything, but I was so afraid to ask, so I just didn't. Like, I felt like it was so out, especially because like it wasn't like we were in, English culture. I feel like is more open about these things than our own. So in these specific like weekend classes, I just kept my mouth shut. I just didn't say anything, just because I was like, oh my god, I can't ask these questions. Which is so bad.
Yeah.
It is. It is. Like, where did that idea come from? It came from somewhere else other than you.
Yeah.
You didn't, like, you're not born thinking that it's shameful or that it's
Yeah.
wrong to talk about these things. Those ideas are inherited, or, you absorb it somehow.
Yeah, and kids are sponges, like exactly what you said. When you hear your teacher speak about it in this way or whatever, like even I remember the way that I found out. I knew that periods were a thing before I had my period, but the way that I found out about periods was more from a religious perspective. Like, my mom one time wasn't praying. And I was like, why aren't you praying? And like my mind was like, oh my god, she's like left the religion, like she doesn't pray anymore, like all of this. But she was like, no, like once a month a woman doesn't pray. So it wasn't like once a month a woman gets her period. It was like, you don't pray. And I didn't know the reason. She's like, when you're a bit older. So I think at this point I was like 7, 8. She's like, when you're a bit older, I'll tell you like when or how you'll know that you don't pray. And it was like a lot of questions. Like in my mind I was like, okay, so like at a time of the month all the women in the world don't pray. I didn't understand that, like, it's different for every woman. So eventually she like kind of tried to prep me, I think, because maybe she didn't get the education. She knew how important it was for me, and she made sure that I attended all the classes in school about like sex ed, periods, all this stuff. So I had like the mental prep before I got it, but I still cried when I got it because I'm like, oh my god, like now I'm a woman and that's so scary, instead of it being an exciting thing. Like all the things that come with being a woman was really scary. And I remember being in the bathroom and my mom was next to me and she was hugging me and I was literally just crying. I'm like, this is just so sad. Like, why does this have to happen? But yeah, and I think I got it at like an age, kind of like an average age, like 11, 12. So it's not like I was like a late bloomer and everyone had got it and I was waiting for it, or it's not like I got it too early either. So
that is a very powerful story. That is a very powerful story. The times that I try to describe like the reality of what happens when we have our first period, I think the beautiful demonstration of that I read in the book Wild Power. And it's like we're moving from one room to another throughout our lifetimes. So when we're born, the first birth we get born into, we're in our mother's womb and we get birthed into this physical world, and we get into this metaphorical womb of the family, and that's where we absorb everything, right? And in many cultures you get another birth after your first period, and you move from the family womb to your menstruating years womb. That's your personal womb. That's a bigger one. That's where you get your identity. That's where you ask the real big questions. And I always, whenever I hear this demonstration, whenever I see this picture, I always see a bridge between those two wombs. It's not like I get my period today and I'm a woman tomorrow. There is a bridge, there is a journey that's going to be taking me from this point to being a woman, from being a little girl to being a woman. And instead of having all of these responsibilities, um, just by having my period, we go into, okay, now I can jump higher, and now I can run faster, and now I'm getting smarter, and my creative juices are flowing, and I can have a more mature emotions. So the way we talk about periods to the young ones, it's very, very important in shaping that experience.
Absolutely. And then following off of the back of that, what would you say that then having that body literacy and that knowledge means both in general to you, but also in terms of spreading it to the Arab world? How important do you feel like that is?
Well, body literacy to me is being one with your body and listening and understanding the signs and signals that your body is gifting you every single day. The body is communicating with us on a daily on the daily since we're born. We see it very clearly in children when they are hungry, when they're sad, when they are sleepy, when they're excited. You see it in their body. The body is giving them those signals. They're communicating it with us. And the body doesn't stop. It keeps giving us those signs. And the way I embody this body literacy is through practicing the fertility awareness method, and by observing those daily signs that my body is giving me. And based on that, I can understand, why am I feeling a certain way in those days? Why am I being super creative and super productive in others? Why do I need rest now? And other things. But being one with our bodies and understanding that the body is actually speaking to us, it's just about learning that language.
I mean, now that you've mentioned this fertility awareness method, do you want to give a brief overview on exactly what that is?
It's a scientific method that allows us to observe certain fertility signs or biomarkers on a daily basis, and know, because of that data that we're collecting, when we are fertile and when we are not. So basically the phases of our cycles. Some people practice the fertility awareness to reconnect with their bodies. Some people practice the fertility awareness method to monitor their general and hormonal health, and some people use it to achieve their reproductive goal, whether that's to prevent a pregnancy or to achieve a pregnancy.
But why does it make you connect with your body? Is it because you're having to touch your body every
Yes.
month? Is it because what exactly is it?
Yeah. So what you do when you're practicing FAM is, one, you're becoming familiar with your cyclical nature. We grow up and we're into systems, so many systems, whether that's the educational systems, whether that is just the societal structure, whether that is where we work. It's a very linear society. It's very linear way of living, and that doesn't really align with our bodies and how we work. So you're becoming more familiar with this cyclical nature of yourself. At the same time, practicing FAM is very, very intimate practice. You're checking one of the signs, one of the biomarkers that you will be checking on a daily basis is the cervical fluids. The cervical fluids are the secretions that come out of our cervixes and into our vaginal opening. So we can check it every single day and know, based on that, our fertility status. It's a very intimate practice and will allow us to know the different phases of our cycles.
That's so interesting because it's like growing up, basically, I don't know if this is the correct scientific word, but basically you're talking about discharge, right?
Well, one of the things that could be described as discharge is the cervical fluids, but that's not the only discharge or not the only secretions that come out of our vaginal opening. We have different fluids that can come out of our vaginal opening, like arousal fluids, like vaginal cell slough, like vaginal moistness. And those are the normal and healthy fluids. We can also have abnormal fluids that could be based on or because of um, an infection, for instance.
Yeah.
So knowing what's normal for me and knowing what is actually working for me and what is healthy for me will allow me to actually see if that change happens into something abnormal, to know that, okay, my body is telling me something, this is a sign from my body, this is a signal, and I can do something about it.
That's so powerful because I feel like at some point all of us as teenagers thought, this is so disgusting, like what's exiting my body, like it feels very gross and it feels like it shouldn't be there, and like it's too embarrassing to tell someone that you see these things like in your underwear, whatever, right?
Yes.
So it's so interesting that like I honestly wish someone would have been like, hey, like when it looks like this means blah blah blah. When it looks like this, it means kaza kaza. And to be honest with you, I'm probably not as literate as I should be. Like I'm still not exactly sure what, when I find what means what, basically.
Yes.
So I feel like that's so powerful to have that knowledge as a female or as someone with a vagina.
It promotes this body sovereignty, that you don't need devices outside of yourselves, you don't need people outside of yourselves, you don't need experts outside of yourself. You are the expert. Everything is inside of you, and you just need to learn that language.
But you described it on your website as like the fertility awareness method and the power that it gave you, as I'm reading off the quote, is basically it being empowering, fun, sexy, and abundant. And yours could be too. I want to know a bit about like how it can be fun and sexy, because at like looking at it, it seems a bit like, oh, that's a bit daunting to have to like, really try to understand that. I mean, I can see how it can be empowering, but I want to know a bit more about your experience, basically.
When I found the fertility awareness method, it wasn't me alone. It was a collaborative effort between me and my partner. So it was like something fun that we were going together. At the time, we were looking at the hormonal contraception and its impacts not only on the health of the body but also on the environment. And months later, that's when we found the fertility awareness method and I started reading about it, and I was so fascinated that this is going on in my body. My body has been telling me this all along. I didn't know about these things, and that's like pleasure of knowing is unmatchable, that this is going on in my body, and now I can give myself the permission to interact with my body in this manner. That's so much fun, because again, every day when I'm interacting with my body, I'm acting like this detective, and it's like a fun game that I'm playing every single day. And charting my cycle, it's a mindful experience. When my partner and I practice it together, I love the part that we do it together, and the responsibility of preventing a pregnancy or for achieving a reproductive goal is a shared responsibility. It's not on me alone. The consent is a focal point when you're practicing FAM correctly. And once you can be talking about your cycles, your periods, your cervical fluids with your partner, you'll be able to talk about anything, everything and everything.
Something that's so crazy is that I feel like this can be a topic that, because of the aspect of shame and because of the aspect of, oh, like, we keep these things quiet, that people wouldn't necessarily talk about in relationships, or they'd feel like embarrassed to share. But it's almost crazy to me that, like, in these relationships, you're sharing your whole lives together, you're sharing your bodies, you're sharing everything, like you've become one, right? Yeah, for some reason, like, these conversations still seem so awkward. Do you know what I mean? When it's like, why should they be if everything else is already being shared and enjoyed between two people? But when it comes to the actual biology behind it, it's like, no, we don't go there. Do you know what I mean?
It's like a hush situation, isn't it?
Yeah, we can change that narrative. You know, we have the power to change that narrative. And believe it or not, men are so excited about learning about our bodies.
You think?
I've worked with so many women and their partners, and I haven't seen, you know, a man that's not interested to learn about what's going on, you know, in her cycle.
I can imagine that it connects them together, allows that open communication.
Absolutely.
I find it so interesting how you say, I gave myself permission. It's like you're talking about consent with your own self, which
yes,
I don't think I've ever heard anyone else say, because usually it's like, I don't give myself consent. Like, I don't give myself permission. I want to know, like, how you're thinking of it in the sense of, like, permission with my own body and my own self.
Yes. That's a beautiful question. And I do talk a lot with my clients about this idea of consent, not only with your partner, but with yourself, especially with practicing FAM. We are collecting data from our body on a daily basis. And we don't want to objectify the body and treat it as a thing that we're collecting and using for our own benefits, right? And so we can change that narrative by giving ourselves that permission and enjoying that experience. So every time, even today, after years and years of practicing FAM, whenever I'm checking for my cervical fluids, I'm asking my body for giving me that sign. Is it ready for me to touch it in a certain way? Is it okay for me to get that data out? Is it okay for me to use this data to treat it better? Is it okay for me to understand it in a deeper level today to best serve it? So yes, the idea of consent, it shouldn't be limited to our relationships with the other, but also our relationships with ourselves.
And you know, I feel like this translates to many other aspects of life, like just in terms of people being able to be honest with themselves and see things as they are, like giving yourself permission to be like, do you know what, let me explore this thing, and I might initially feel shame or embarrassment or whatever emotions, maybe because of the society around me or because of my own preconceived notions. But do you know what, I'm going to say that it's okay for me to feel those things, but it's more important for me to face the truth in front of me, for me to be able to grow, whatever that is, whether
Yes.
it's the truth about our own bodies, about our own behaviors, our own actions. I feel like giving yourself that permission is really key, because we can really be our own obstacles, like our own barriers to our own growth in that sense.
Yes.
Even in admitting our own faults sometimes, you know?
100%.
You know how, like, you're saying that you started this journey with your partner?
Yes.
And when I think of it, I'm like, this sounds like, my thought right now, I'm like, this sounds so exciting. Like, when I get married, I want to be able to openly do this. Do you think this is something for people who aren't engaging in sexual activity? Do you think this is an important practice, like FAM, and being able to be that aware of your cycle? Like, would you say that, like, you encourage women who aren't who aren't participating in sex, basically?
Yes. I'm actually developing a course on body literacy for teenagers, teens and tweens
amazing.
right now. And I think the best time to learn the fertility awareness method, and to be exposed to this body literacy, is before your first period. And the second best time is now, whenever you are in your journey. So we all have bodies, we all have cycles, whether we are engaged in a sexual activity or not, and this body is ours. Before we share it with others, it's ours, and it's ours to understand and honor and embody and take care of. It connects us to our bodies. We don't need, or we shouldn't need, to wait until we are engaged with a partner to be connecting with our bodies.
That even links back to what we were saying about earlier, like, so that people aren't so afraid of these things that happen so naturally. Like, when they get their period, like, they're like, oh my God, like, I have cousins like this too, that were just so confused by it. So that would help to eliminate that. But one thing that was so interesting to us when we were looking through your work and the kinds of things that you're putting out there is that you said that you sync your activities to your cycle, and it gives you like this deep awareness of your body and influences your mind and energy. So I, like, when we were saying this, our mind was blown almost when we were like speaking about this, because it's such a new concept but so interesting. So tell us about that and about how you do different things like at different stages in terms of activities and how it's benefited you.
Absolutely. So this goes back to the previous question. Is this awareness, is this body literacy for everyone? Absolutely, it's for everyone, because it can influence your entire life. It can influence your productivity levels. It can influence your focus levels. It can influence the way you can perform activities and perform workouts, what your body is actually doing. So to put it in short, or in short terms, when I start my period, that is like my first day of my cycle, is with the period, I rest. I don't do work. I don't work on Niswa or do like working work. I rest. I do yin yoga on my bed. I really enjoy when my partner cooks for me, warm soups, warm stews, raspberry leaf teas, and enjoying that support, and really honoring it, and asking for help when we need it, instead of feeling like guilty or ashamed that we actually need that rest and need to recharge. Everyone recharges their phones. No one is feeling guilty about the phone needing to recharge, but we need to recharge as well. And that rest during our period especially will give us an opportunity to give from a full cup in the next phases of our cycles, instead of having this burnout culture. Everyone is so burnt out. So I rest, I don't do work, I dream during my periods, and I dream both literally and metaphorically. I love journaling my dreams during my period. It's the time of where your energy is inwards, your wisdom is higher, your inner compass is very clear, and that's when I love to receive guidance through my dreams. So I love journaling my dreams throughout, my cycle, but especially in my periods, because that's when I have the vivid guidance that I love to just document.
What makes you believe that? What's the, like, are there studies backing this up? Do you feel like you just have more intuitive power or whatever it may be on your period? Like, where does that come from?
Yeah, hormonally, let's talk about hormonally, all of our hormones are at their lowest during our period. Whereas if you look at a diagram of the entire menstrual cycle, you see the ups and flows and ups and downs of it's like a roller coaster afterwards, and the changes are on a daily basis. But when we are on our periods, everything is at rest. The body is in a letting go mode. We're letting go of the blood. That's a very physical letting go, but it's a very easy time to let go of other things. Like one of the practices that I have entered into my period, my menstrual phase, is asking myself, what do you want to let go of other than your blood? Whether
Wow.
that's ideas, whether that's emotions, relationships, a piece of clothing that doesn't serve me anymore. It's in alignment with what your body is actually doing at that time. It's letting go of things. It's not time for building. Nothing is being built inside of your body is shedding. And so it's just, I want to mirror what's inside of me, on the outside. And you can see lots of that wisdom within the traditional Chinese medicine. It's fascinating.
Hmm. And have you seen actual, when you've acted on on that throughout your period, throughout that week, have you then
Yes.
seen positive changes in your life that have come about afterwards?
Absolutely. I have noticed that I'm more energetic and more productive the more I give myself rest during my period. So, in my pre ovulatory phase, which is the phase after my period, that's when I have the surge of energy. That's when I feel more energetic. That's when I feel like, here I am, world. and and hormonally also, you start having that surge of estrogen, going up, rising, in our bodies. And estrogen is naturally a building hormone. I call it our builder friend. So it builds the endometrium inside of our uteruses. It builds our muscles. It builds our bones. It builds our brain cells. And so it's a great time for me to plan. The pre-ovulatory phase is also called the inner spring. So from its name, it's a great time to put on your seeds. So the seeds for your projects, the seeds for your ideas. Put on the outline of how do you want this cycle to be. For me, putting outlines and brainstorming ideas for content, for blog posts, for chapters of the book I'm writing, for courses, writing the different titles for the different modules, and so on. So it's a great time for planning and putting things on your calendar. And then you go into your ovulatory phase, and that's when you have the peak of your estrogen, the peak of your testosterone. And that's when you feel like you can do anything, like literally anything. You can work for hours. You don't have to sleep, for 8 to 12 hours. You can do things that you didn't imagine you were able or you were capable of doing before. So that's when I put things into action. That's when I write everything. That's when I do the group exercises, the high intensity exercises. The body is building muscle, and if my intention is to build muscle, that is the perfect time to do it. And it's a shining time. It's like the opposite of menstruation, where in menstruation our energy is inwards. In ovulation our energy is outwards. And so maybe you will notice yourself to be like a social butterfly. You want to go out, you want to meet your friends, you want to have just social activities. And that is a perfect time for that, because you have that outwards energy. And then you move into the last phase of the cycle, which is the luteal phase, or the phase before your period. And for a long time, that was my favorite phase. And a lot of people go, what?
Yeah,
Everyone
what?
doesn't like that phase.
Yeah, I hate that phase so much. It's the worst for me.
I love my luteal phase. I was lucky I didn't have much of the challenges that a lot of women experience. And I found it to be a grounding phase. My most challenging phase used to be the ovulatory phase, where I have the surge of too much energy and I couldn't know where to direct it. And that was like my challenge, until I understood that was actually the challenge, and now I can better navigate it. And so in the luteal phase, I love how grounding it is, for myself. It's more closer to my nature. I'm artistically creative during that phase, which is also something I really enjoy doing. And that is a phase where we're going back inwards. It's also called the inner fall or inner autumn. So when we look at the nature in fall or autumn, it's shedding this the leaves, and so we have a small letting go during that phase. We're slowing down, we're going back inwards, and that is the phase where there is no sugarcoating. There is no sugarcoating. Everything is there, clear, and like crystal clear. You can't unsee things. So work-wise, I use that strength in editing my content, in editing my writing, because I can spot spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes and that weird, full stop that doesn't belong. I can see it so clearly and so fast, and I use that. Other people and other clients that I've worked with would tell me this time of my cycle is very challenging because of that truth telling, because of the no sugarcoating rule. They're unkind to their bodies because they can see the flaws in their bodies and how they look and how they treat each other, and how they interact with their bodies. And I go, okay, that's fine. You're always going to look at this phase as, again, the truth telling, maybe a little exaggerating. And I have this idea that I adapted recently, also from the book Wild Power, that's called bleed on it. So whatever I'm feeling, and I feel like it's maybe exaggerated during the luteal phase, I write it down and I reflect on it during my menstrual phase.
That's
And
amazing.
yes, and I bleed on it. So that's when
that.
I make the decision based on a more grounding place than a place that maybe is hurt and a place that maybe is protective. Because I always say the luteal phase is a protective mama bear. It wants to protect us. It's not going to sugarcoat anything. And if you feel like you're angry when you're talking with certain people, or if you're sensitive when something comes up, a certain topic, maybe that's your protective mama bear trying to tell you, maybe you need a healthier boundaries. Maybe you need to end this relationship. Maybe this person is really toxic, and maybe this person is really draining your energy. So you can evaluate those things, your health, your relationships, the boundaries that you put between you and your colleagues, your family members, your partner. Healthy boundaries during this phase are crucial. So that's just like an idea of how I utilize the understanding of the different phases and what they do, what's happening inside of my body hormonally, into how I can reflect it on the outside.
That's so interesting, because I feel like it's something that a lot of girls can relate to, where in the days before the period, for me anyway, like you say, they're the days when I'd be the most emotional. Like, I might have a day where I find myself so upset over something that I would never normally get upset over. Like, yes. And I feel like I can be, quite rational, whatever. So I clock it and I'm like, okay, I'm so upset about this, and I know that why am I upset about it? Okay, my period must be about to come. But listening to you saying that, being like, actually, no, wait a second, evaluate those emotions and why you were feeling that way. And maybe it's something that, like you need to clear up in your life or whatever it is. That's a very interesting perspective.
And waiting to evaluate for them. like waiting to evaluate them
Yes.
during your period.
Yeah, never make decisions in your luteal phase.
Emphasize.
Always bleed on it.
Always feel it. I like that. Do you find then that there are just some times in that phase where you get like you move past it and you're like, okay, no, I was overreacting, or that it is most of the time where it's like, no, actually, I really did have a point and it does lead to a deeper issue?
Yeah, most of the time it's actually true. Like what gets brought up during that phase, it has at least a percentage of truth to it. Maybe some exaggeration, but mostly it wouldn't come up if it wasn't true. So I would always reevaluate, not make, a quick decision then. But usually, if it comes up in your luteal phase, it's your body trying to protect you.
Wow, our bodies are so smart.
They are.
They're so nice to us. We should be more nice to them.
Yeah.
They're doing all this protection for us.
Literally. And Zainab, something that I loved when the Met Gala dresses were all coming out on your Instagram, I was like, she's actually a creative genius. She posted, if anyone doesn't know, I loved it. It was like all the like 4 dresses from the Met Gala and like kind of relating them to each phase of your menstrual cycle, which I think is so funny.
It was fun to create. That was maybe one of my favorite posts.
I think I loved it. I was like, she's so smart, mashallah. I wanted to ask about how when we talk about being aware of our cycle and kind of how that connects us to our femininity, a lot of women struggle with issues, for example, PCOS, and I think something I've heard someone recently say that they feel like they're less of a female because they're not able to connect with that cycle, or they feel like, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Like I'm really disconnected and all of that kind of stuff. So what do you I just kind of want to hear your thoughts about that. Like how does a woman who's going through that connect with her femininity and connect with her cycle in that sense?
I always say, if you're not bleeding, if you're not having a period, that doesn't mean you don't have a cycle. We always are in our cycles. Always. If you're not having menstruation right now, you're in your pre-ovulatory phase. Your body is trying to ovulate, and you are in that phase until ovulation occurs.
Even if it's for a year.
Even if it's for a year. You're already, you still are in that phase, and your body is trying to ovulate. And one of the things that one of my teacher has suggested for women who have lived so many years without ovulating is to look outwards into nature, into what can be reflected as their menstrual cycle. And the easiest way to do it is looking at the moon cycles. So you look at the moon cycles and you live your life in accordance with the moon cycles. And that in that way, you're reminding yourself of that cyclical rhythm. You're reminding yourself that you are inherently cyclical, and you don't have to have menstruation. You don't have to have a period to be a woman. You don't have to have a period to live cyclically. You can do that on your own terms. When it comes to health wise, yes, of course, we want to support the body to ovulate. We want to support the body to have that hormonal balance again. But until we do that, we still can navigate that cyclical lifestyle through the cycles of the moon.
Do you mean for those specifically that don't get periods to align it with the moon, not for those who do get periods to have any connection with the moon, or do you think that they should have some connection there too?
Okay, so interesting. The idea of syncing our cycles with the moon is an ancient idea. Before electricity, before lights, when the only light we were exposed to as humans were the lights of the sun and the moon, that's when historically we know that most women were in sync with each other and in sync with the moon. And we have 2 most common types or themes. People or women who bleed with the full moon and women who bleed with the new moon. And it's an energetic difference between the two. So women who are bleeding with the full moon, those cycles are called the red cycles, and those are associated with the healers of the community, the women who are the guides of the community, um, um, the women who have a mission and more of a service to the people around them and not focused on the aspect of family. On the opposite side, we see the bleeding with the new moon, and that is the mothers of the tribe. It's most likely representing at that time, and those are the women focused on family, or if they're not in a relationship and they're not having a family, those are the women who are focused on themselves and developing that self to become the wise woman. So it's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful analogy that we can have as an additional aspect to connecting with our bodies and understanding our cycles. It's like an additional piece to the puzzle, but we always going back to our bodies and what my body is telling me right now. And if my body is communicating something different than what the moon is saying, I'm going to believe my body. But if I can look at the moon and look at my body and put them together to get a bigger picture, fine. There is this obsession with syncing our cycles with the moon that I don't agree with. We're not robots. Our bodies are alive and they're changing and they're going to shift from one phase to another, and we're changing beings. I've had both cycles that are red cycles and white cycles, and it's fascinating to see that I went from that teacher mode when I had my bleed with the full moon, and I was in a total student mode when I was thinking with the new moon,
No
when
way.
I started my period with the new moon. So that was like, okay, that's interesting, and I can use that to navigate my life now on a deeper level, and I can understand that I can become a better teacher now, and I can become a better student now. But at the same time, it was always me going back to my body and what my cycle is telling me. If I don't have a bleed, if my body is not ovulating at the moment, it is okay for me to look at nature because it's reminding me of my body. It's reminding me of how my body is supposed to be working, of how my body is going to be functioning on a healthy cycle. So it's okay to look at the moon, but listen to your body first.
On that note, what is the source of that information? Is that also ancient tribes that used to follow that, or is it like a religious thing, or is it more spirituality? Like, what's the source of who started that kind of concept?
I have read it in many cultures. It's not just one culture that does mention that. Specifically, South America, I've heard so many stories of different tribal cultures, that was a prominent thing. So yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I think it's so interesting how the world does work in cycles. We have seasons that roll around every year. There's cycles in a lot of different ways, like in even like the way that fruit rots, and you know the cycle of the fruit, and it's a seed and then you put it in the soil and it comes life again. So I feel like to me it makes sense that cycles can be syncing. You have certain fruits in certain seasons, like all of that kind of stuff, the same way that you would have certain characteristics in certain parts of your cycle. So now that kind of you told us about this, I think I want to be conscious of it and more mindful of it, and start to just see if see my own cycle in comparison to the moon. I think that would be
even in Islam we look at the moon cycle, that's how our calendar works.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and there's certain days that are more holy, like for example hijama, the the practice of kind of
Yeah.
cupping with blood secretion, there are certain days, depending on the moon cycle, that you're encouraged to do that because it's better to release those toxins on those days. So like
Yeah.
even if you have different religions, I'm sure it's probably in other religions, not only Islam, like it's very interesting how that comes. But I think sometimes like modern day life almost kind of makes that feel like it's some sort of magical, like stupid stuff.
Yeah, crazy.
But I think yeah, like you crazy person, you're like going with the moon, but it's like,
but it's energy. Like it's literally
yeah.
energy. Like everything is energy. Honestly, it is mad. Like even the thought of even like when people hear these things and they're like, oh my God, energy, whatever. It's like thoughts are energy, your words are energy.
Absolutely.
When you walk into the room, the way somebody has the power to come in and shift it, like make the atmosphere better or worse or whatever it may be. Like these are things our body is getting signals and putting out signals all the time to the world and from the world. So one thing that I was really interested in asking you, and we discussed this briefly before, but I would really love to know, after talking about the fertility awareness method and our own body literacy, do you think how comfortable a woman is in her sexuality translates to how comfortable she is in her femininity or within herself? Like, do you think that you can feel a stronger feminine energy from people who are more in touch with their sexuality, or do you think that can come from people who aren't at all in touch with their sexuality?
That's a tough question. It's a good question. It's a tough question.
We were telling you in our like pre-call, it got us into a little like not debate, but into like a long discussion, probably for an hour.
For a while, actually.
Yeah, I think it was an hour of us discussing. So I think it's a bit unfair that we're giving you like
this
short amount of time. Give us an answer.
Okay. Maybe I can answer from my own personal experience, from my own perspective. I think it rings true to me. I think the more comfortable and exploring and excited and just connected I am sexually and comfortable I am sexually, the more I feel confident in my body and in showing up to people and in delivering my message. It did, like, this sexual awakening does transform you as a human. It's not just something that happens between you and your partner. It really is a transformative experience, and I do think it translates into other aspects of our lives. So yeah, I don't know about other people, but I think it is true for me.
And I think it would be different for everyone, honestly.
Right.
I think every female has her own independent experience.
That's true.
Do you think that there's a difference in there then, in a woman being connected with her sexuality and a woman being connected with her body, or do you think they're very interlinked?
I don't know. It's a tough one.
Maybe one helps the other.
Maybe. I do think that for me, sometimes my connection to my body helped my sexual experience or my sexual expression, and sometimes my sexual expression helped my connection to my body. I think they're helping each other, and they're supporting each other at the same time. It doesn't have to be like one should come first than the other. They can coexist at the same time and support my whole being.
Yeah. I think sexual energy is such an interesting thing because I don't think you need to be having sex to be in touch with your sexual energy. I think it can be so powerful.
Absolutely. Yesterday I was delivering a talk in the embodiment conference in Arabic, the first embodiment conference in Arabic.
Amazing.
And yeah, it was so exciting. And it was very interesting because we started talking about this life force that we have as women, that our body is in preparation of a potential pregnancy every cycle, right? But what if pregnancy doesn't occur? Is that life force wasted? And I will argue that it's not. We can channel that force, that life force, and give birth to whatever we decide, to whatever we desire, whether that's a project, a company, an idea, a relationship, a dish that I cook with love. So many things, so many creative funnels that I can um, use this sexual activity and sexual energy and life force that I have in my body. The body is already doing it inside of me. I can channel it and use it for something else if I don't want to create a baby that cycle.
Maybe even a new version of you.
Exactly. I love that.
I love that. And it makes so much sense because you say your ovulating phase, which is basically the phase that you get pregnant. And that's kind of the phase that, your hormones are the highest and all that stuff. I think that's so interesting because that's the phase that you say that you're the most creative, that
Yes.
that you want to make things, you want to do, you have all that energy. So it just makes sense that you would be birthing some sort of thing, even if it's not a child.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Panel, I really it's crazy how our bodies are. It's crazy. Me trying I'm just this is mad.
We're just soaking it all in.
I mean, the last thing I wanted to ask you is basically about Yoni steaming. I just want to know more about it and your experience.
Yes. So Yoni steaming is an ancient practice. It has been practiced all around the world. You can see references of it historically all over, in all of the continents. And in short, it is using the steam of the water, whether alone or with herbs. And from its name, you steam your yoni or your vulva and into your vaginal opening. A lot of people use it for healing things like fibroids, like period pain, spotting, for regulating their cycles. And lots of people also use it for spiritual healing, such as say healing after a miscarriage, healing after a sexual trauma, for preparing for birth, for postpartum. It's a vast practice and you can use it for many different things. I have personally used it for spotting, to stop the spotting that happens after my period, and that was an indication for low progesterone, that I also had signs from practicing FAM that I was having those signs of low progesterone. So that practice, practicing FAM allowed me to pinpoint the issue. And the yoni steaming or the vaginal steaming or womb steaming, it has so many names, allowed me to be able to address it. So that is my personal experience. I also had a great experience with ancestral healing. One time when I was steaming and journaling afterwards, it was like a download, not just from me. It was like the presence of the women of my family and the healing that's not just happening for me, but for that entire generations before me.
Wow. What?
Yeah. Yeah. It was beautiful. It was like I was dreaming, but I was awake. It was a fascinating experience.
I don't understand. So you were practicing yoni steaming.
Yes.
And then was the intention of ancestral healing? How did the link happen?
There wasn't an intention put. I was steaming and I was open to the experience and what it can bring. And I had my notebook next to me and I started journaling without thinking what's going on or what's, running through my head, and started sobbing and I started seeing visions. It was just fascinating. I can't describe it into words, but it was like I was dreaming, but it was while I was awake. And I saw women of my lineage, lines and lines of being there for me during this practice. And that's when I realized, I think that steaming was part of my culture and part of my community healing, and I just don't know about.
Do you think that you had that reaction because of the fact that now you were open to something for so long that might have before been considered taboo or been considered something that, okay, we don't talk about or we don't do or we're not this in touch with our bodies, so that when you actually came to do it, it was like almost this release for you that you didn't know that you needed?
Yes, I think it's safe to say that. I think it's safe to say once you're reconnecting with your body, and I keep saying the word reconnecting because we're not just connecting to our bodies. We were all born connected and we lost that connection one day. And now all we do is an attempt to reconnect. And the more we reconnect and the more we put on more of the threads and bring more of the pieces of the puzzle, the more the image and the more the picture is clearer to us. So I think that was the experience that I was ready to receive at that time, and that was the reason why I received it.
I think it's honestly so inspirational how you just kind of allow yourself to experience. And it goes back to that thing that we were talking about in the beginning about giving yourself permission.
Yes.
Because it seems like you really allow yourself permission with no expectation of like what is meant to happen, but just allow yourself to explore. So it just kind of, it's funny how this convo came into a full circle of allowing yourself to have these experiences.
Yeah, and allowing yourself to just be. Like, I feel like we're always so focused on either the past or the future. Like, oh, I have these notions of what I should and shouldn't do, or oh, what would people say if they knew, or whatever. And it's just like, let's just be in the moment.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we spend so much time outside of it that it's actually like, it's sad. We should be more just in the mindset of letting ourselves feel and be and do whatever we need to do.
And be curious. Just be curious. Just feed that curiosity.
It's like exactly what you guys are saying about how, like, even this whole conversation about how we were mainly talking about connecting to our bodies, but it seems like it really reflects on other aspects of life and everything that you're talking about, like burnout culture, like making sure that you rest, making sure that you give yourself what you need, like letting go of stresses and letting go of things that no longer feed you positivity.
Yeah.
So I think I think, Fallon, the way that you explain your experience and basically explain your experience, it makes me more curious to really get into that, because I've been curious about connecting with my body on that level for such a long time, but I really feel ready, like khalas, like why not just kind of dive into it.
It's time.
Yeah,
it is time.
Yeah, why not, you know? I feel like you say, like, it is such an important thing and it's such a beautiful thing. It's such a natural thing.
And thank you for sharing that with us today. Honestly, I think it's beautiful and I think there's a lot to learn from it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
The pleasure was all ours. So do you want to just tell everyone where they can find you on social media and what you have coming up that they can look forward to?
So you can find us at niswa.org. That's the website. You can also find us on Instagram, same Niswa.org, at Niswa.org on Instagram. What's coming up? We're working right now on a sustainability workshop through the lens of the menstrual cycle. We're working on the teen and tween mothers course. That's what's coming up until the end of the year. So super, super exciting.
Wish you all the best of luck.
Thank you.
Exactly. We can't wait.
Thank you so much. It was really, really fun.
Oh, it was so fun for us and enlightening. And thank you to everyone who was also listening today.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Culture Mocktail, where we will continue the conversation.
Yep, and until then, we are asking you to embrace that mocktail
and keep flourishing.